Today's podcast, I'll be talking about ADHD and my thoughts on it. Make sure my phone is not going to beep during it because it has a tendency to do that. And usually we treat children with ADHD, but trust me, there's plenty of adults and parents that have the ADHD. And some of them know it. Some of them get diagnosed with it. Some of them are self-diagnosed. I mean, there is a little bit of a fad or a trend for adults to say, well, I got ADHD. Or they even just say it like a figure of speech when they have a hard time sitting down, which isn't very nice. But, I mean, they might be correct. And that speaks to ADHD being just a very, very wide spectrum. And sometimes it is a condition. And sometimes I think it's a pattern of behavior. It doesn't mean that all people with ADHD type symptoms are resigned to having it permanently. And it usually is it's a state that it remits, which means it gets better. Sometimes we say that children grow out of it. Sometimes parents develop it. You can see me? Close enough. I like looking at ADHD in terms of traditional Chinese medicine. I feel like it does a good job of explaining what in fact it's identifying. ADHD symptoms usually look like in childhood as hyperactivity. And you'll see a lot of kids who are like that. Are they all ADHD? Maybe not. If you give any kids a lot of sugar, they'll elicit a lot of those symptoms. Does that mean sugar causes ADHD? No. But I think a bigger issue is not being addressed or identified. And I'd like to look at the nutritional component of ADHD or any type of hyperactivity in a very, very brief and concise way. I feel like individuals who lack sufficient protein or yin, if you follow TCM, that they will have much higher incidence and experiences and episodes of elaborate ADHD. So what do I mean? If we've got a community of children that lack protein because they're not having sufficient protein at breakfast, or they're skipping meals, or they're having a very carb-rich meal, their blood sugar regulation is going to be erratic. And we know that sugar is a trigger for ADHD-type symptoms, whether it's hyperactivity, poor focus, fluctuations in mood, outbursts, tantrums, anxiety, all that stuff. So if your blood sugar is going to contribute and trigger those incidences, then it makes sense to try to regulate your blood sugar. A side component of that is also building up yin, having more protein, because that grounds the yang or the explosiveness or the energetic nature that we have. We are yin and yang, and we need to balance those two in order to have a steady state and a balance in our life. So someone who overthinks, they have too much yang. Someone who is very sluggish and slow, maybe they have too much yin, or an excess, or under, and that it gets tricky. So you can have, most people don't have too much yin. Maybe they don't have enough yang, but someone can have too much yang and still have sufficient yin, or not enough yin. It gets tricky. It is. I can tell. I can hear it. What do I suggest? Build up your yin to ground you. I like using the analogy of a helium balloon. If you don't have a weight to it, you let go, it floats away. And that's hyperactivity. That balloon, think of it like your brain, your mind racing, floating off, overthinking, overanalyzing. But if you have protein, if you have yin, if you have a weight, and grounds that balloon. It's in a steady state. It's not going anywhere. You still have the helium. You still got the brain. You still have the thoughts, but it doesn't float away. It's grounded. So sometimes these children just need some grounding exercises. Breathing, slowing down their mind, not getting overstimulated. And then that connects with the video games, the social media, the constant hyperstimulation that these children are also getting. So there's all these layers of components to hyperactivity that they're all addressable. They're all lifestyle specific, and they can help offset a genetic disposition. Because a lot of times parents will be like, I was the same when I was a kid. I'm still kind of like that now. And I'm like, we need to fix you too. So in a very simple way, more protein, a heartier breakfast, proper outlets, having alternatives to overstimulating the brain. Who's calling me? Who did that? What else is there? Adults with ADHD, I think they got more of the same, where it's probably partly nutrition, maybe more so carb, not being able to manage carbs well, a dysglycemic state. And then other times, I think it's also how they manage their stress and have outlets. It's easy to get into overstimulation of the mind, of the brain, getting fixated on work, coming home, not having a proper outlet, not having a hobby like I tell everyone that they need to have. And you get fixated. And then that fixation leads to overstimulation and sometimes can lead to some paranoia, obsessive compulsive, repetitive behaviors, all that sort of thing. So OCD kind of stems from this hyperactivity of the mind where you just start to know too much. And childhood, there is some OCD, but that usually shows up as tic behaviors, more of a physical symptom. But as you get older, those compulsive behaviors, those tics tend to become more psychological, less. They still have physical tics, but sometimes it's just more functional things. Like they will, touch the lights in a certain order, or they'll wash their hands, or they just won't go out on Fridays or something like that. There are some supplements that help. I mean, I think everyone should be on protein powder. If you don't get enough protein in your diet, that would go a long way to just at least starting the day off right so that you're grounded in terms of nutrition, protein, and blood sugar regulation. But something like L-theanine. L-theanine is a wonder for overthinking, overanalyzing, compulsive thoughts, intrusive thoughts. That's the other one I did mention before. The intrusive thoughts, that's a big one. A lot of times people are like, I can't get this idea out of my head. But theanine has a way of just like turning down the volume. So it's like, you know what? I don't think of it as much. It's not really on my mind. When they stop using it, if they've turned a corner, then they don't need it anymore. But if it's too soon and some of these other areas haven't been addressed, then it tends to come back. Acupuncture is another good one to use because we'll work on the pericardium and the heart meridians. We'll work on Yin Yang. We'll work on the governing vessel points. And this has a great, like in the moment and also a long-term effect of quieting down the brain. I use acupuncture for children too. It's very effective. And they like it. It's not painful, especially these points. It's almost numb up there, really. And also hyperbaric oxygen. I find that that's actually very, very useful. It limits their stimulation because in that hour that they're in the chamber, they're not going anywhere. It kind of forces them to slow down. And I think that's a nice practice for everyone to have. Just work on their breathing. You don't have to be entertained every minute of the waking day. Having downtime is good. I think that's good.